So, a few more notes before we get started. I mentioned yesterday the process of developing mindfulness of breathing. Is a gradual process when the various hindrances of the mind kind of get weaker, the distractions, then the ability to stay focused for longer periods of time becomes possible. And so we mentioned about paying attention to the beginning, the middle, and the end of each breath. And of course, even in one breath, there's actually many little sub-breaths, but that's even a deeper level of awareness. But you might think that you're breathing in a 3-second breath, but actually there are many short breaths within that that make up one. That's an aspect of impermanence. Sort of like a train. You might see a train go by, and if you didn't see the coupling in between the train cars, you might think it's just one long train. But, there's many separate cars pulling it, but you may not see that, if it's going fast. So, the same way, within one breath, there's many minute breaths that arise and pass away, or many little movements of expanding. The same way as when you stretch out your arm, it's not just one movement, but it's many short, extending, not enough, 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 extending, not enough. That's what is called the subtler details of the breathing. So anyway, being able to even be aware of those, or simply connecting the in-breath to the pause, the out-breath to the pause, to experience the whole breath body. Then the next phase is calming the breath. So once you gain a little bit more concentration and the distractions are not so frequent, then there's this a sense of kind of a more open space in the mind and body arises, and a feeling of tranquility and of well-being. The mind stops worrying about what time it is and other kind of worries and preoccupations. And the pains no longer sort of affect you so much. Then so the breath will calm down, and sometimes it'll get very even faint, or the pause will become longer. You might not think you're breathing, and so there can be some kind of some fear or some worry about that could arise. But you shouldn't worry about that, because it will be a very natural process. And but this idea of calming the breath, that the breath becomes very calm, and the need for oxygen becomes less, because when you sit still and you're not moving, then the body doesn't require so much oxygen. Because the activity of the cells require oxygen, but if they're not very active, because the body is sitting perfectly still, and also the mind, when your thoughts subside, then you also don't require so much oxygen, because thinking uses massive amounts of oxygen. Brain activity uses a lot of oxygen. So when the brain activity subsides in terms of thinking and neurotic restlessness and so on, then the need for so much breath gets less, and so the breath will become very calm. And at that time, because I don't know if any of you have experienced that yet, but once in a while you may have short periods of that. But in the process of the mind settling down, becoming more tranquil, strange kind of sensations may occur. And you shouldn't get worried about them. But sometimes you're like, wow, what was that? So strange sensations like the feeling of some body parts disappearing. Like the feeling of your hands might, seem to have disappeared. And you kind of, where are my hands? Or even the whole body even. Or your head, or parts of the body, or even the whole body. But if you open your eyes, it's all still there. And this is only what is called a distortion of perception. Because the mind isn't clinging and holding on to its mind-made reality so much. Or it could feel like your body's being pushed over to one side. But if you open your eyes, you may still be sitting up straight. Or feel like your head is going way up into the clouds, or you're shrinking down to the size of a pea, or even being turned upside down. So but all that is just in the mind. So, and there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing good, there's nothing bad. It's just these phenomena that occur. Or you might see light in the mind. You might see a little star of light, or you might see some light like the sun rising, or the moonlight, or just like somebody's pulled on a 40-watt bulb or something inside your head. Or it could be any number of other things, blissful sensations. But you shouldn't. You should only just observe them and know that these are impermanent. These are simply byproducts of gaining concentration. And they're nothing to try to hold on to. Some of them are very pleasant and pleasing and, wow, far out. Or you might see some images or visions, but all these things, you should just don't try to push them away, but because they're impermanent and they'll go away anyway. But don't expect to try to hold on to them, because then you'll be disappointed, frustrated, because you can't hold that light, or something. Or that state of peacefulness. So, but anyway, that's part of the process of calming the mind. Now, if it might be that the breath kind of you can't feel it any longer, then people say, "What should I do then? I can't feel my breath. What should I concentrate on then?" Don't worry. Just feel the body. If the breath gets so subtle or faint, then the body is there, and the body is an equally good object. Actually, it is the next object anyway of the practice, or any sensations in the body that are there. And what if the body disappears? What if the breath and the body disappears? And be happy. No pain. Just be aware of awareness. If everything disappears, just be aware, that's all. Be aware of nothing. There's nothing else to do, just be aware. But anyway, so I'm just mentioning these things that if they happen, that not to get worried or anything is strange. You just maintain awareness of whatever is present. Now, just to mention again about the thoughts. How many people still have lots of thoughts in mind? But most of those thoughts are probably, thoughts that are not going to help your meditation practice too much. More thoughts that just make the mind more excited or lost in the past or future. As I mentioned before, I mentioned about the right thoughts of the Noble Eightfold Path, the right thoughts. The 3 right thoughts, but then somebody reminded me that I forgot to say what they were. So the thought of renunciation, the thought of non-ill will, and the thought of non-cruelty. So if you're going to think anyway, think about those kind of thoughts rather than just the useless sort of mundane stuff that may be going through your mind, or your worries and fantasies and so on. Because you can never go wrong with thinking those kind of right thoughts. So those are the kind of things we substitute. If you have just ordinary neurotic type of thinking, you can substitute for it. So the thought of renunciation is simply the thought of how good it would be not to be so burdened with so many possessions and duties and activities and things that just waste your time. Especially that you have to be preoccupied and worried about. In other words, to lighten up one's life. The thought of the non-ill will basically is the metta, wishing kind, friendly thoughts towards, all beings. And so if, you have these recurring thoughts about people, negative thoughts about certain persons or memories, about, incidences and so on, to send those persons metta, wishing them to be free from their anxiety and fears or their greed, or their hatred, their suffering. And also to yourself as well, to send those thoughts to oneself. Or to even forgive them. If you keep thinking, blaming somebody for having hurt you, even in your meditation, just forgive them and then send them metta, wish them well, get on with their life. Or forgiving yourself. Again, those are like for persistent, recurring thoughts that keep coming back. Or the thought of non-cruelty, not to be cruel. Metta and cruelty, or non-ill will and cruelty, are close, but they're different. You can have ill thoughts toward a person, but you wouldn't necessarily go and punch them in the nose or do something cruel to them. But if you dwell on the ill will, it could lead to that. So, but anyway, we'll talk more about the right thoughts. But anyway, if you have a lot of thinking in the meditation, then you may not be able to just stop all your thinking, but begin to substitute just useless negative thinking for these kind of more positive thoughts that lead the mind toward more freedom. So these are just a few things to keep in mind as you're continuing to try to develop your basic concentration and centeredness in the present moment, the body and breathing, and developing that subtlety to notice the sensations, and you can, when the breath gets very faint, that you can't really notice it very much. Of course, that's the time that you don't want to start doing the 3-part breathing again. So doing that deep, slow breathing is only in the beginning to help you relax and get focused and concentrated. But then once the mind starts settling down, then doing the deep breathing would disturb that deepening effect. But of course, if the mind starts to get restless again later on, you can come back and do that 3-part breathing again in order to get refocused. But if the breath becomes very faint, then, because as we're going to start doing tomorrow, opening more up into the body, but you can even do that now if the mind is ready to feel more of the body and sensations around the breathing. As you're aware of the breathing, you can still feel, an itch there and a scratch there and a little, body twitch there. And, there's things always, so many things, happening. And so these can be included into the frame of the awareness. It's called the breathing body. So you don't have to exclusively just focus on the breath. The idea is to eventually be able to open up from that. The breath is still there, but it starts to include other sensations and, of course, then your thoughts. And especially when you're, trying to develop your concentration, it's like you have 2 minds. Part of your mind has to be focused on, let's say, the breathing or the body. Your primary object, what's called primary object, would be the breathing body. But then you have to have a reserve part of your awareness on call or standby to look for the mice or be alert for the mice coming out. That means the thoughts running around in the back of our mind. And the mind can do that. The mind can monitor many things at one time. It's very large, although most people have a small contracted mind, but when the mind starts to expand, there's no limit to what it can be aware of. So at the same time that you're trying to develop your concentration on the breath, part of that tension has to be alert for the various hindrances and thoughts that are trying to run in and steal our mind away, like a thief sneaking in the back door to steal your mind. Where's the body go? And then sort of to start this meditation, actually, and you can add to start the meditation when you're doing some deep, slow breathing, you can combine it with sending out thoughts of metta, which is a nice thing to do because it kind of helps to eliminate the tendency for having ill will thoughts in the mind come up later. You have a question? Don't scratch. In the meditation, that's a no-no. Because the idea is to see these irritations and see how they well up, and just to observe them. They well up. They last for 5, 10, 15 seconds. They come to a peak. And you can see how you're kind of, the body's tensing up, or, but then they pass off. But every time you scratch, you reinforce that habit. And you reinforce the idea that I don't like that. And you reinforce the sense of I as well. So scratching and rubbing things, that's a very important part of meditation. We want these things to happen. Because without them, the mind is not going to transform. And so various distractions that you can watch and observe how your mind is reacting to them, but there's no need for a reaction because those objects are impermanent and they're just temporary phenomena and they disappear by themselves. But if you move, then you disturb that deepening of the tranquility, and then you also reinforce the sense of yourself. But then we will talk about those things more as well. So go ahead and just set up a good posture. Oh, one more thing. The urges. So along with the thoughts or some of those mice that are running around in the back of our mind are the urges that arise. So as you're sitting there, meditating, all of a sudden an urge, like the urge to scratch. So if you see that, just make a note of urging, and you just watch the urging. It's just urging, so what? And as you watch it, the urge will just arise. And instead of watching the itch, you watch the urging. And so then when you're watching the urging, there's no more itch. And so the itch will disappear and the urging will disappear. Or maybe the itch will still be there, but the idea is you watch the urging or the wanting mind rather than the object of what it wants. And then the wanting will just peter out, and you'll be left, in awareness in the present moment. So all the various urgings, the urging to lift your arm or move, even with the pain, you see the urge to want to move your knee or your foot, or the urge to do anything. It's very fascinating to just watch the series of urges that arise in the mind, but not giving in to them. So just take a few moments to check the posture. The natural inward curve of the lower spine. Openness, upper chest, open. The head balanced on top. And begin taking a few 3-part breaths. See if you can take about 4 seconds just to gradually breathe in, hold the air in a couple seconds. Take about 4 seconds or more. Breathe out. And combine it with this train of thought, metta thought. Breathing in, may I be well, happy and peaceful. Breathing out, may all beings be well, happy and peaceful. Breathing in, may I be free from anxiety, agitation, fear, worry. Breathing out, may all beings be free from anxiety, worry, fear, agitation. Just breathing in, I develop mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Breathing out, may all beings develop mindfulness, concentration, wisdom. And breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, relaxing the body and mind. Breathing out, relaxing the body and mind. Just discontinue any controlled breathing. Just let the breath return to its own uncontrolled pattern. But continue to feel the subtler movement, sensation. In the abdomen, the rib cage, your chest, or at the tip of the nose. Just be aware of in, sitting, out, sitting. Or just leave off the noting, just be aware. The background knowing. Just tuning in to the beginning, the middle and the end of the in-breath, however short. And the pause, the beginning, the middle and the end of the out-breath, however short. And the pause. Try to notice how each breath is different. Sometimes the in-breath longer than the out-breath longer than the in-breath. Sometimes it's an easy breath, sometimes a difficult breath. It's part of the alertness. Be alert for thoughts trying to sneak in the back door. Be aware of any urges that arise. Try to notice or detect subtler sensations, vibrations. In the breathing body process. Like looking through a magnifying glass. To detect subtler thoughts, subtler sensations.